The city exhaled a weary, rain-slicked sigh, its neon lights bleeding into the puddles that mirrored a bruised twilight sky. Inside a well-worn sedan that smelled faintly of air freshener and exhaustion, Leo Vance gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The car was his office, his dining room, and, on nights when the rent was a particularly cruel joke, his bedroom. Each fare, each ping from the rideshare app, was a tiny, desperate prayer for survival. He was a single father, a title he wore with a mixture of fierce pride and bone-deep terror. His world had shrunk to the size of his 6-year-old daughter, Mia, a radiant sunbeam in his otherwise overcast life. Every mile he drove, every stranger he ferried through the concrete canyons, was for her. For her mismatched socks, her love of strawberry ice cream, and the way her laughter could, for a moment, make the mountain of bills on his kitchen table seem conquerable. The latest ping jolted him from his reverie. A pickup from the Croft Tower, a monolithic shard of glass and steel that pierced the clouds, a monument to a kind of wealth Leo could barely comprehend. He navigated the slick streets, his old car looking like a dinghy next to the gleaming yachts of luxury vehicles lining the curb. A man emerged from the revolving doors, silhouetted against the opulent glow of the lobby. He was tall, dressed in a suit so sharp it could have cut glass, and moved with an air of detached authority, as if the world were merely an inconvenience he had to navigate. He slid into the back seat without a word, the scent of expensive cologne and cold ambition filling the small space. Airport, International Terminal, the man said, his voice a low, clipped baritone. He didn't look at Leo. His gaze was fixed on the tablet in his hands, his face illuminated by its cold, blue light. This was Julian Croft, though Leo didn't know it. To Leo, he was just another fare, another ghost in the city's vast machine. Julian was a man who had built an empire from code and foresight, but in the process, had hollowed himself out. His heart was a locked room, the key long lost to a tragedy that had stolen his light, leaving only shadows and the relentless pursuit of more. More money, more power, more distance from the crushing silence of his penthouse apartment. The drive was silent, punctuated only by the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the disembodied voice of the GPS. Leo glanced in the rearview mirror occasionally. He saw a man drowning in plain sight. His eyes, though fixed on a screen, were vacant, haunted. Leo had seen that look before, in the mirror on his worst days. It was the look of profound, unshakable loneliness. As they pulled up to the curb at the bustling international terminal, the man finally looked up. "Here is fine," he said, his voice still devoid of warmth. He tapped his phone to pay, the transaction completed in a sterile, impersonal instant. He got out, adjusted his tie, and disappeared into the throng of travelers without a backward glance. Just another fare. Leo sighed, ready to mark himself available for the next ride, the next small prayer. But as he prepared to pull away, a glint of dark leather on the back seat caught his eye. He reached back and picked it up. It was a wallet. A beautiful, handmade Italian leather wallet that probably cost more than his monthly rent. He opened it. Inside, a thick wedge of $100 bills sat nestled beside a row of platinum credit cards. His heart hammered against his ribs. He counted the cash quickly, his hands trembling. $2,000. More than enough to fix the rattling noise in his engine, to buy Mia the new winter coat she desperately needed, to breathe for just a week. The temptation was a physical thing, a weight in his gut. Who would know? The man was gone, probably on a plane to another continent. He was so rich he probably wouldn't even notice it was missing for days. It would be a drop in the ocean for him, but for Leo, it was a lifeline. He thought of Mia's face, the way her eyes lit up when he read her bedtime stories. He thought of the lessons he was trying to teach her, about kindness, about honesty, about being a good person even when the world made it hard. What kind of father would he be if he took this money? The man in the suit had looked empty, but he was still a person. This was his. With a deep, shuddering breath that felt like releasing a demon, Leo closed the wallet. Tucked into a small, hidden flap, his fingers brushed against a worn photograph. He pulled it out. It was a faded picture of the man from his back seat, but younger, his face relaxed, a genuine smile gracing his lips. He had his arm around a laughing woman with kind eyes, and on his shoulders sat a small boy with a gap-toothed grin, a miniature version of his father. A family. A ghost of a family. In that moment, the rich man in the suit ceased to be an abstract concept of wealth. He became a man who had loved, a man who had lost. Leo's decision solidified, hardening from a wavering hope into an unshakable resolve. He had to return it. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about honoring the memory in that photograph. It was about doing the right thing. He started the car, not toward the next fair, but back toward the glittering, indifferent spire of Croft Tower. The journey back felt different. The city lights seemed less harsh, the rain less oppressive. He was driving not for a fare, but for a reason. He pulled up to the imposing entrance. The same doorman who had watched him pick Julian up, now eyeing his modest car with suspicion. Leo got out, holding the wallet tightly in his hand. He walked toward the gleaming doors, his tattered sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished marble floor of the lobby. He felt small, out of place, a sparrow that had wandered into an eagle's eyrie. He approached the main security desk, a vast expanse of white marble manned by a woman with a severe haircut and an earpiece. "Excuse me," Leo said, his voice quiet but clear. "I'm here to return something to a man I just dropped off at the airport. I believe he works here." The woman looked down her nose at him, her expression a carefully constructed mask of professional boredom. "Name?" she asked, her tone suggesting he was wasting her time. I don't know his name," Leo admitted, feeling a flush of embarrassment. He was tall, in a dark suit. "I'm his Uber driver." The woman's skepticism deepened. "Sir, hundreds of men in dark suits work in this building. I can't help you without a name." Leo's heart sank. He had driven all the way back, sacrificing precious time and fuel, only to be stopped at the first hurdle. He felt a surge of frustration. "Look, he left his wallet in my car," Leo said, holding it up. "It has a lot of money in it, and his identification will be inside. Can't you just, I don't know, look at the ID and call him?" He opened the wallet, careful not to flash the cash, and pulled out the driver's license. The name read Julian Croft. He slid it across the marble counter. The security guard glanced at it, and her entire demeanor shifted. The boredom vanished, replaced by a wide-eyed, almost fearful alertness. She straightened her posture, her hand subtly reaching for a button under the desk. "Mr. Croft," she whispered, the name spoken with a reverence that startled Leo. "One moment, sir." She spoke urgently into her microphone, her voice a low, deferential murmur. "Mr. Vance? Please, have a seat. Someone will be right with you." She gestured to a plush leather sofa that looked more comfortable than Leo's own bed. The sudden change in treatment was dizzying. Who was this Julian Croft? Leo sat on the edge of the sofa, the fine leather cool against his worn jeans. He felt the eyes of everyone in the lobby on him, a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. A few minutes later, a woman in a sharp pantsuit strode purposefully toward him. She had an air of frantic efficiency. "Mr. Vance? I'm Clara, Mr. Croft's executive assistant. Thank you so much for coming. We've been trying to reach him. His plane hasn't taken off yet. He was in a panic." She spoke in rapid-fire bursts, her relief palpable. "He's on his way back from the airport now. He would like to thank you personally. Can you wait?" Leo simply nodded, overwhelmed. He had expected to just drop the wallet and leave, to melt back into the anonymity of the city. He never expected this. He never expected to be waiting in the heart of a corporate empire for a personal audience with its king. While he waited, Clara offered him coffee, water, anything he wanted. He politely declined, just sitting there, the wallet on his lap, a strange symbol of the collision of their two worlds. He thought about Mia. He should have been home by now, starting her dinner. He sent a quick text to his neighbor, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, asking her to check in on Mia and explaining he was running late. The reply was instantaneous. "Of course, dear. Don't you worry about a thing. She's a little angel." The thought of his daughter, safe and sound, grounded him. An hour later, Julian Croft swept back into the lobby, his face a thundercloud of stress. He saw Leo on the sofa, and his expression softened, just slightly, from harsh granite to something more like weathered stone. "You're the driver," he stated, not a question. Leo stood up, holding out the wallet. "You left this in my car, sir." Julian took it, his long fingers brushing against Leo's. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and for the first time, Leo felt that the man was truly seeing him, not just looking through him. Julian opened the wallet, his gaze going not to the cash or the cards, but to the small, hidden flap. He checked that the faded photograph was still there. A visible wave of relief washed over him, a deep, private exhalation. "Thank you," Julian said, his voice lower now, less clipped. This is very important to me." He pulled out the thick wad of cash. "Here, for your trouble, for your honesty." He tried to press the $2,000 into Leo's hand. Leo instinctively pulled back. "No, sir. I can't take that." Julian frowned, confused. It was a look he rarely wore. Confusion was not an emotion he permitted himself. "Why not? You earned it. You could have taken it, and I'd have been none the wiser." "It's not my money," Leo said simply. "I didn't come back for a reward. I came back because it was the right thing to do." He looked at the floor, then back at Julian. "If you insist, maybe just $20? To cover the gas and the time I lost. That's all." Julian stared at him, truly stared. In his world, everything had a price. Every action had a motive, usually greed. He dealt with people who would sell their own grandmothers for a fraction of what was in that wallet. And here was a man whose worn-out shoes and tired eyes spoke of a life of constant struggle, refusing a small fortune out of simple principle. It was a concept so foreign, so pure, that it momentarily short-circuited his cynical worldview. "What's your name?" Julian asked, his tone shifting from dismissive to genuinely curious. "Leo Vance." "Leo," Julian repeated, testing the name. He put the cash back in his wallet, except for a single $100 bill. "Take this," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "It's not a reward. It's a compensation. Your time is valuable. I wasted it. Don't insult me by refusing." Leo hesitated, but the man's gaze was insistent. He finally took the bill, the crisp paper feeling alien in his calloused hand. It would cover groceries for 2 weeks. "Thank you, sir." "No, Leo," Julian said, a flicker of something unreadable in his hollow eyes. "Thank you." As Leo turned to leave, Julian spoke again, almost as an afterthought. "Do you have a card? For your driving service?" Leo fumbled in his pocket and produced a crumpled, generic business card provided by the rideshare company, with his name and number handwritten on the back. Julian took it, his fingers tucking it carefully into his suit pocket. "I may have need of a reliable driver in the future," he said. It was a formal, businesslike statement, but underneath it, Leo sensed something else. A seed of curiosity had been planted in the barren soil of the billionaire's heart. As Leo walked out of the gleaming tower and back to his humble car, he felt a strange sense of lightness. He hadn't just returned a wallet. He had stood his ground, held to his values in the face of immense temptation. He had looked a king in the eye and been seen not as a servant, but as a man. He didn't know it then, but that single, honest act had set in motion a chain of events that would irrevocably alter the course of his life, and the life of the lonely man in the tower. The $100 bill on his passenger seat was not just money. It was the first crack in the wall that separated their two worlds. The following week was a blur of the usual. Endless driving, greasy takeout meals, and the precious, fleeting hours with Mia. The encounter at Croft Tower began to feel like a strange dream, a brief foray into a different reality. The $100 had been a godsend, stocking their pantry and allowing Leo to buy Mia that new winter coat, a bright pink one that made her look like a tiny, joyful marshmallow. He had almost forgotten about the strange, intense billionaire. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, his phone buzzed with a private request. The name on the screen was simply J. Croft. The pickup location, a high-end art gallery in the city's most exclusive district. Leo's stomach did a little flip. He accepted the ride, a current of nervous energy running through him. When he arrived, Julian was waiting outside, this time dressed in tailored casual, where that still cost more than Leo's car. He got into the front passenger seat, a move that surprised Leo. Most clients, especially the wealthy ones, sat in the back, maintaining a deliberate distance. "Good afternoon, Leo," Julian said. His voice was still reserved, but it lacked the icy edge from their first meeting. "Afternoon, Mr. Croft." "Where to?" "Just drive," Julian said. "No particular destination. I have a call to make, and I think better while moving." It was an odd request, but Leo was being paid for his time. He pulled out into traffic, driving aimlessly through the city's arteries. Julian made his call, a sharp, ruthless negotiation that involved millions of dollars and the fate of a smaller company. Leo overheard snippets about hostile takeovers and shareholder value. It was a language from another planet. But what Leo noticed was not the content of the call, but the man making it. Julian's voice was a weapon, precise and deadly. Yet, his eyes were distant, his fingers drumming a restless, anxious rhythm on his knee. He was a master of his universe, yet deeply ill at ease within himself. After the call ended, an awkward silence settled in the car. Leo, wanting to fill it, gestured to the small, lopsided crayon drawing of a sun with a smiley face taped to his dashboard. "My daughter, Mia, made that for me," he said, a warmth creeping into his voice. "She says it's to keep me safe on the road." For the first time, Julian's attention seemed to genuinely snag on something personal. He looked at the drawing, his gaze lingering on the cheerful, childish scrawl. "Your daughter," he said, the words soft. "How old is she?" "She's 6, Leo replied, a proud smile touching his lips. "She's everything." Julian didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the drawing, and for a moment, the mask of the ruthless Seo slipped, revealing a profound and startling sadness. It was a fleeting glimpse, like seeing a crack in a dam, but it was there. "I see," he said finally, turning to look out the window. They drove for another hour in near silence before Julian directed him back to Croft Tower. As he got out, he handed Leo a folded stack of bills. "For your time." It was $500. "Mr. Croft, this is too much," Leo protested. "My rate is." "Your rate is what I say it is," Julian interrupted, but his tone was not harsh. "Consider it a retainer. I'd like to use your services exclusively from now on, when you're available. No more app. Just call me directly." He handed Leo a sleek, black business card. Julian Croft, CEO, Croft Industries. Underneath was a private cell number. This was more than just a ride. It was an offer, a strange, unspoken arrangement. Leo, stunned, could only nod. This became their new routine. 2 or 3 times a week, Julian would call. Sometimes it was for a ride to a meeting. Other times, it was for one of their aimless, thinking drives. During these drives, the silence between them slowly began to fill with words. Julian, in his guarded way, started asking questions. "What does Mia like to do?" "She loves the park," Leo would say. "And drawing. Her drawings are all over our apartment. It's like living inside a rainbow." "What was her mother like?" The question was quiet, tentative. Leo's smile faltered for a second. "She was kind," he said, his voice thick with a memory. "She loved to sing. She passed away when Mia was a baby. A sudden illness. The doctors, they did what they could." A shared, unspoken grief hung in the air between them. Julian didn't offer platitudes or empty condolences. He just nodded, a deep and solemn understanding passing between them. He, of all people, knew the hollow ache of that kind of loss. One Saturday, the call came with a different request. "Leo, are you and Mia free this afternoon?" The question was so unexpected it took Leo a moment to answer. Yes. We were just going to the park." "There's a private botanical garden I have a membership to," Julian said. "It's quiet. I thought, perhaps she would enjoy it." Leo was hesitant. This was crossing a line, from a professional arrangement to something personal. But the thought of Mia's face lighting up at the sight of 1,000 flowers won him over. "Okay," he said. "Yes, she would love that." He picked them up in his old sedan. Mia, strapped into her car seat in the back, was buzzing with excitement. She wore her pink coat and held a half-eaten lollipop. When Julian got in the front seat, she leaned forward. "Are you my dad's friend?" she asked, her voice clear and high. Julian froze, seemingly unprepared for the directness of a child. Yes, I suppose I am," he said, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. "My name is Julian." Mia, are you rich?" she asked, with the blunt innocence only a child possesses. Leo shot her a mortified look in the rearview mirror. "Mia, that's not a polite question." But Julian chuckled. It was a rusty and used sound, but it was genuine. "Yes, Mia, I am." "Wow," she said, her eyes wide. "Can you buy all the ice cream in the world?" "I probably could," Julian said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Do you like ice cream?" "I love strawberry," she declared. The botanical garden was a paradise, a lush, manicured world away from the grit of the city. For the first time, Leo saw Julian relax. He walked beside them, his hands in his pockets, listening as Mia chattered on about butterflies and the color of the flowers. At one point, Mia stumbled and scraped her knee. She let out a frightened wail, her face crumpling. Before Leo could even react, Julian was kneeling beside her, his movements swift and sure. He pulled a pristine handkerchief from his pocket and gently dabbed at the small scrape. There, he said, his voice surprisingly soft. It's just a little scratch. You're very brave. He looked at Mia, his eyes holding a tenderness Leo had never seen. You know, brave people get a reward. He then proceeded to tell her a silly, made-up story about a brave princess who fought a dragon disguised as a scraped knee. Mia, distracted, stopped crying and started giggling. Leo watched them, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. He was watching a man who commanded boardrooms and moved markets kneel on the dirt to comfort his daughter. In that moment, Julian wasn't a billionaire. He was just a man, being kind. As they were leaving, Mia tugged on Julian's sleeve. She held up a slightly crumpled piece of paper. It was a drawing she'd made while sitting on a bench. It depicted 3 stick figures. A large one labeled Daddy, a small one labeled MIA, and another large one, standing slightly apart, which she had carefully labeled Julian. They were all holding hands under a lopsided, smiling sun. This is for you, she said, pressing it into his hand. So you don't be lonely. Julian took the drawing, his fingers tracing the crayon lines. He looked at the simple, heartfelt gift, and his carefully constructed composure finally broke. He turned away quickly, but not before Leo saw the glint of tears in his eyes. He didn't say anything, just cleared his throat and carefully folded the drawing, placing it in his breast pocket, right over his heart. It was just a piece of paper, a child's scribbling. But for Julian Croft, it was the first ray of sunshine to pierce the cold, gray fortress he had built around himself in years. He wasn't just a client anymore, and Leo wasn't just a driver. They were something else, something undefined and fragile, brought together by a lost wallet and the profound, simple truth of a child's drawing. The drives continued, but their nature shifted. They were less about business and more about connection. Julian started to talk, not just about work, but about himself. The words came out in fragments at first. Like pieces of a shattered mirror, he was cautiously trying to reassemble. He spoke of his childhood, of a demanding father who equated love with achievement. He spoke of his wife, Amelia. He described her laugh, the way she could fill a room with warmth just by entering it. He spoke of their son, Thomas, a bright, energetic boy who had his mother's eyes and his father's curiosity. We were on our way to the beach, Julian said one evening, his voice barely a whisper as they sat in the parked car, overlooking a city that glittered like a sea of fallen stars. It was Thomas's 5th birthday. He wanted to build the world's biggest sandcastle. Amelia was singing along to the radio, some silly pop song. Thomas was kicking the back of my seat. A tear traced a path down Julian's cheek, stark against his stoic profile. A drunk driver ran a red light. I woke up in the hospital. They were gone. Leo didn't speak. There were no words for a grief that vast. He just sat there, a silent witness to the man's profound pain. He finally understood the source of the emptiness in Julian's eyes, the reason for the sterile, joyless perfection of his life. He was living in a mausoleum of his own making, a monument to his lost family. The wallet you returned, Julian continued, his voice thick. The photograph inside, it was the last one we ever took together. At a park, just a week before. I've carried it every day since. Now Leo understood the panic, the relief, the sheer importance of that small, faded square of paper. It wasn't just a photo. It was the last tangible piece of a life that had been stolen from him. I'm so sorry, Julian, Leo said, the words feeling hopelessly inadequate. Thank you for telling me. Julian turned to him, his eyes raw with a vulnerability that was both shocking and deeply human. I haven't spoken their names aloud to anyone in 5 years, he confessed. I thought if I didn't, it would hurt less. I was wrong. It just made the silence louder. After that night, the final wall between them crumbled. Julian was no longer just Mr. Croft, the enigmatic billionaire. He was Julian, a man carrying an impossible burden. And Julian, in turn, began to see Leo and Mia as more than a distraction or a curiosity. They were a lifeline. He started to integrate himself into their small world in quiet, meaningful ways. He'd have Leo pick him up at the end of the day, and they would go to the grocery store together. Julian, who hadn't set foot in a supermarket in a decade, would push the cart, looking bewildered and out of place, while Mia directed him to the cereal aisle and the strawberry ice cream. He learned that Leo was a talented cook, a skill he'd honed to make healthy, delicious meals on a shoestring budget. One evening, Julian made another unusual request. Would you and Mia be willing to have dinner at my apartment? Leo was taken aback. Your apartment? Yes. It's quiet, Julian said, a hint of self-deprecation in his tone. Too quiet. And I'm tired of room service. So Leo found himself in the pristine, minimalist kitchen of Julian's penthouse, a space that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. It was all chrome and white marble, with not a single personal touch in sight. While Leo cooked a simple spaghetti bolognese, the rich, savory aroma filling the sterile air for what felt like the first time, Mia explored. She discovered a grand piano in the vast living room. Can I play it? She asked Julian, who was watching them with a hesitant, almost fearful curiosity, as if he'd invited wild animals into his sanctuary and wasn't sure what they might do. Of course, he said. Mia plinked at the keys, a discordant but joyful melody that echoed through the silent apartment. Julian watched her, and a real, genuine smile touched his lips. It transformed his face, chasing away some of the shadows. During dinner, Mia, with spaghetti sauce staining her chin, looked around the enormous dining room. Your house is very big, she said. But it's sad. Julian paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. Sad? Why do you say that, Mia? Because there's no pictures on the fridge, she said, with the irrefutable logic of a 6-year-old. Our fridge has all my best drawings. That's how you know it's a happy house. The statement, so simple and profound, landed in the center of the room like a stone dropped into a still pond. Julian looked from Mia's earnest, sauce-smeared face to his own gleaming, empty Sub-Zero refrigerator. He had every luxury money could buy, but he didn't have a single crayon drawing to mark his home as happy. After dinner, as Leo was cleaning up, insisting over Julian's protests, Mia fell asleep on the enormous white sofa, her small body curled up, looking tiny in the vast expanse of the room. Julian brought out a cashmere throw blanket, one that probably cost $1,000, and gently draped it over her. He sat in an armchair, watching her sleep, his expression a complex mixture of tenderness and sorrow. She's so full of life, he said quietly to Leo. She reminds me of... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Leo knew he was thinking of Thomas. She's a good kid, Leo said, his heart aching for his new friend. Before they left, Julian walked them to the private elevator. Leo, he said, his voice serious. I've been thinking. This driving, it's not a long-term solution for you. You're intelligent, you're resourceful. It pays the bills, Leo said with a shrug. Most of the time. I have a logistics department at my company, Julian continued, ignoring Leo's remark. Managing fleets of vehicles, shipping, supply chains. It's complex. It requires a calm head and practical problem-solving skills. Skills you have. I want to offer you a job. A real job. Head of the department. Leo was speechless. He stared at Julian, certain he had misheard. Me? Julian, I'm an Uber driver. I have a high school diploma. I don't know anything about corporate logistics. You know how to manage a vehicle under pressure. You know the city better than any map, and you have more integrity than any Ivy League MBA I've ever hired, Julian said firmly. I can teach you the business side. I can't teach character. The salary would be more than enough to give you and me a security. A real home. Good health insurance. The mention of health insurance sent a shiver down Leo's spine. His own plan was the cheapest available, a flimsy net with massive holes in it. The thought of providing something better for Mia was a powerful lure. I don't know what to say, Leo stammered, his mind reeling. Say you'll think about it, Julian said. That's all I ask. As Leo carried a sleeping Mia back to their small apartment that night, his world felt like it was tilting on its axis. A few weeks ago, he was fighting to keep his head above water. Now, a billionaire was offering him a lifeline that looked more like a luxury yacht. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. He looked at Mia's peaceful face, her breath warm against his neck. For her, he would do anything. He would even dare to step into Julian Croft's world, not as a driver, but as an equal. The offer hung in the air between them for a week. Leo was torn. The security Julian offered was a dream, a fantasy he had barely allowed himself to imagine. A stable job, a good salary, health insurance. It meant no more choosing between new shoes for Mia and fixing the car. It meant a future that wasn't a constant, grinding struggle. But fear held him back. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of not belonging in Julian's polished, high-stakes world. He was Leo Vance, the Uber driver. What could he possibly offer a place like Croft Industries? He discussed it with Julian during another one of their drives, laying his insecurities bare. "I'm afraid I'll let you down, Julian," he confessed. "I'm afraid everyone will look at me and see the charity case you hired." Julian listened patiently, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Do you know how I started my first company, Leo?" he asked. "I was a college dropout with a single idea, working out of my parents' garage. Everyone, including my own father, told me I would fail. They said I didn't have the experience, the connections, the pedigree." He paused, a wry smile touching his lips. "They were wrong, because I had belief in my idea, and I had the will to see it through. I'm not offering you charity. I'm making an investment. I'm investing in your character, your resilience, your intelligence. The same things I invested in myself all those years ago." His words chipped away at Leo's fear, replacing it with a fragile seedling of hope. Maybe Julian was right. Maybe he was more than just his circumstances. The following Saturday, Leo made his decision. He called Julian. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I accept your offer." A long silence met him on the other end of the line, and for a terrifying second, Leo thought Julian had changed his mind. Then, he heard a deep exhale. "Good," Julian said, his voice filled with a quiet satisfaction. "Welcome to the team, Leo. You start Monday." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Julian was a patient but demanding mentor. He spent hours with Leo after work, explaining the intricacies of global supply chains, market analysis, and corporate strategy. It was like drinking from a fire hose, but Leo was a quick study. He was used to thinking on his feet, to solving problems with limited resources. He found that the logic of navigating a city's traffic wasn't so different from navigating the flow of goods across a continent. He was good at it. His new colleagues were wary at first. They whispered in the hallways, wondering who this man was, the one who had the CEO's personal attention. But Leo didn't engage in the office politics. He just put his head down, worked hard, and treated everyone with the same quiet respect he showed the world. Slowly, he earned their trust, not because of his connection to Julian, but because of his competence and his humility. Life changed for Leo and Mia. They moved out of their cramped, drafty apartment into a comfortable two-bedroom place in a safe neighborhood with a good school. For the first time, Mia had her own room, which she immediately covered in her crayon masterpieces. Leo traded his battered sedan for a reliable family car. The constant, gnawing anxiety about money began to recede, replaced by a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. But the most significant change was not material. It was the deepening of their strange, three-person family. Julian became a regular fixture in their lives. He wasn't just a boss or a benefactor. He was Julian. He came for dinner every Thursday. He helped Mia with her first-grade homework. He took them to museums and baseball games on the weekends. He was slowly, cautiously, learning how to live again. His sterile penthouse began to show signs of life. A bright pink coat was often slung over a minimalist chair. A half-finished board game sat on the coffee table, and on the gleaming door of his Sub-Zero refrigerator, held in place by a powerful magnet, was a single, lopsided drawing of three stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. It was the first picture to ever grace its surface. One crisp autumn evening, the three of them were at a local park, the same one where Leo often took Mia. The air was filled with the scent of fallen leaves and the sound of children's laughter. Mia was determined to learn how to ride her new bicycle, a shiny blue one Julian had given her for her 7th birthday. Leo was jogging alongside her, holding the back of the seat, his encouragement mixing with her squeals of a frustration and delight. Julian sat on a bench, watching them. He wasn't looking at his phone or thinking about a business deal. His entire attention was focused on the simple, beautiful scene in front of him. He watched Leo, his face filled with patience and love. He watched Mia, her brow furrowed in concentration, her pigtails flying. A powerful wave of emotion washed over him. A complex cocktail of joy for what was in front of him and a deep, aching grief for what he had lost. It didn't hurt less, not really, but the pain was different now. It was no longer a hollow, empty ache. It was tempered with a new warmth, a new connection. Mia, wobbling precariously, suddenly pushed off with her feet and pedaled. She went 5 feet, then 10, her initial shock turning into a triumphant shout. "I'm doing it. Daddy, Julian, look. I'm doing it." Leo let go, his face breaking into a huge grin of pride. He and Julian both clapped, their applause echoing in the cool air. Mia rode in a wobbly circle before coming to a clumsy halt near the bench. She beamed at them, her face flushed with victory. "Did you see me?" "We saw you," Leo said, ruffling her hair. "You were amazing." Julian smiled, a true, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "You were a champion, Mia." In that perfect, ordinary moment, surrounded by the gold and red of the autumn leaves, they were not a billionaire, a former Uber driver, and a little girl. They were just a family. A found family, stitched together from the broken pieces of their pasts, bound by kindness, loyalty, and the unconditional love of a child. It was a life none of them could have ever predicted, born from a simple act of honesty over a lost wallet. It was a testament to the fact that sometimes, the most profound treasures aren't the ones you can hold in your hand, but the ones that find a way to fill the empty spaces in your heart. The piece, however, was fragile, a delicate glass sculpture in a world of stone. The central crisis arrived not with a bang, but with a cough. It started small, a persistent, dry hack that rattled Mia's small frame. Leo chalked it up to the changing seasons, a common cold. He gave her children's cough syrup and made sure she was bundled up warmly. But the cough didn't go away. It deepened, becoming a wheezing, desperate gasp for air, especially at night. Her small chest would rise and fall with a terrifying effort, a faint whistling sound accompanying every breath. Fear, an old and unwelcome acquaintance, began to coil in Leo's stomach. He took her to a local clinic, the kind that served low-income families. The doctor, overworked and rushed, diagnosed it as a bout of bronchitis, prescribed an inhaler, and sent them on their way. But the inhaler offered little relief. Mia grew pale and listless. The bright spark in her eyes dimmed. She was too tired to draw, too weak to ride her new bike. She would lie on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, her breathing shallow and labored. Leo's world began to shrink again, contracting around this single, terrifying point of focus. His daughter's struggle for air. The new job, the nice apartment, it all faded into the background. The old panic returned with a vengeance. One night, it reached its terrifying crescendo. Leo was woken by a strangled, gasping sound from Mia's room. He rushed in to find her sitting bolt upright in bed, her eyes wide with terror, her face a pale, bluish tint. She was fighting for every breath, her small hands clutching her throat. The whistling sound was gone, replaced by an awful, strained silence. She couldn't get any air in. Pure, unadulterated terror seized Leo. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely dial 911. The voice of the operator was a calm, distant anchor in his storm of panic. He stammered out his address, his voice cracking. "My daughter. She can't breathe." The wait for the ambulance was the longest 10 minutes of Leo's life. He held Mia, rocking her, whispering useless words of comfort, his own heart feeling like it was being squeezed in a vice. He felt utterly, horrifyingly helpless. This was the nightmare every parent fears, the moment when all you can do is watch your child suffer. The paramedics were efficient and grim. They strapped an oxygen mask to Mia's face and rushed her out to the waiting ambulance. Leo scrambled in after them, never letting go of her hand. At the hospital, the emergency room was a chaotic symphony of beeps, shouts, and pain. Mia was whisked away into a room filled with machines and stern-faced doctors. Leo was left in the hallway, then directed to a sterile waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and despair. The minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. Every time a doctor or nurse walked by, his head would snap up, his heart leaping into his throat. He tried to pray, but his mind was a frantic mess of fear and self-recrimination. How had he let it get this bad? Why hadn't he pushed the first doctor harder? The new health insurance Julian had provided. He hadn't even had time to fully understand the policy. What if it wasn't enough? What if they wouldn't treat her properly? He was spiraling, drowning in a sea of what-ifs. And then he thought of Julian. He felt a pang of guilt. Julian had given him so much, had lifted him out of his desperate situation. The last thing he wanted to do was to come to him as a supplicant, a problem to be solved. His pride, a stubborn and resilient thing, screamed at him not to make the call. But then he looked at his trembling hands and thought of Mia's terrified eyes. His pride was nothing compared to his love for her. He needed help. He needed a friend. Swallowing the hard lump in his throat, he pulled out his phone and dialed Julian's private number. It was well after midnight, but Julian answered on the second ring, his voice instantly alert. "Leo? What's wrong?" "Julian," Leo's voice broke. "It's Mia. We're at the hospital. City General." She couldn't breathe. He didn't need to say more. "I'm on my way," Julian said, his voice a blade of calm authority cutting through Leo's panic. There was no hesitation, no questions. Just a simple, immediate promise. "Don't move. I'll be there in 15 minutes." True to his word, Julian arrived in what felt like record time. He wasn't dressed in a suit or tailored casuals. He wore jeans and a simple black sweater, his hair disheveled as if he'd just thrown on the first things he could find. He looked less like a CEO and more like what he was in that moment, a worried friend. He found Leo huddled in a plastic chair, his face buried in his hands. Julian put a firm, steadying hand on his shoulder. "Any news?" Leo shook his head, unable to speak. "Okay," Julian said, taking charge. He strode to the nurse's station, his presence immediately commanding attention. He didn't raise his voice or flash his money. He simply spoke with a quiet, unshakable authority. He asked for the head of pediatrics, the attending physician, the specialist on call. He used names and medical terms that made it clear he was not to be dismissed. Within minutes, a harried-looking doctor emerged to speak with them. "It's a severe asthma attack, complicated by an underlying pneumonia," the doctor explained. "Her airways are dangerously inflamed. We're doing everything we can, but she's not responding to the standard treatments as quickly as we'd like. The next few hours are critical." The words critical and not responding hit Leo like a physical blow. He swayed on his feet, and Julian's hand was there again, steadying him. "What does she need?" Julian asked the doctor, his voice level. "What is the absolute best treatment, regardless of cost or availability?" The doctor hesitated. "There's an advanced treatment, a specialized nebulizer and a combination of biologics, but it's incredibly expensive, and, frankly, we don't have the equipment readily available here. We'd have to transfer her to the Children's Institute uptown." "Then transfer her," Julian said without a moment's pause. "I want her to have the best. Dr. Annabelle Sterling at the Institute. She's the best pediatric pulmonologist in the country. Call her. Tell her Julian Croft is on his way with a patient. I will cover every expense. Just get this little girl the care she needs." The doctor's jaw dropped. He knew the name Julian Croft. Everyone did. The name Dr. Sterling was even more revered in his field. The impossible had just become possible. "Yes, sir," the doctor said, his entire demeanor changing. Right away, Julian handled everything. He arranged for a private medical transport, spoke to administrators, and cleared every bureaucratic hurdle with a few quiet phone calls. He moved with a focused intensity that was breathtaking to watch. He was using his immense power and wealth not as a bludgeon, but as a shield, creating a protective bubble around Leo and Mia. While they waited for the transport, Julian sat with Leo in the stark waiting room. The bravado was gone, replaced by a quiet empathy. "The waiting," Julian said, his gaze distant. "It's the worst part. The feeling of helplessness. When Thomas was in the hospital after the accident, all I could do was sit and wait and hope." He was no longer a billionaire fixing a problem. He was a father, speaking to another father, sharing a pain that transcended wealth and status. He was sharing the most broken part of himself, and in doing so, was giving Leo the greatest possible comfort, the knowledge that he was not alone in his terror. When the transport arrived, Julian rode with them to the Children's Institute, a state-of-the-art facility that looked more like a hopeful resort than a hospital. Dr. Sterling, a woman with kind eyes and an air of supreme competence, was waiting for them. Mia was rushed to the pediatric ICU, a world of quiet efficiency and cutting-edge technology. Leo and Julian were once again relegated to a waiting room, but this one was different. It was comfortable, quiet, and filled with a sense of hope. They sat in silence for a long time, the unspoken bond between them solidifying into something unbreakable. Leo finally found his voice. "Julian, thank you is not a big enough word. I can never repay you." Julian turned to him, his eyes serious. "There is nothing to repay, Leo. You and Mia, you gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. A reason. This." He gestured around the hospital. "This is just money. It's meaningless without people to share it with. People to protect." He looked at Leo, his gaze direct and filled with a profound sincerity. "Your family, Leo. That's what you do for family. You show up." The word family hung in the air, beautiful and fragile and strong. Leo felt tears welling in his eyes, but for the first time that night, they were not tears of fear, but of overwhelming gratitude. In the darkest hour of his life, when he felt most alone, he had found his brother. The Children's Institute was a world apart. The air itself seemed to hum with a quiet, confident energy. Mia was settled into a private room in the pediatric intensive care unit, a space that was less intimidating and more like a child's bedroom that happened to contain advanced medical equipment. The walls were painted with cheerful murals of cartoon animals, and a smart screen on the wall could play her favorite movies. Dr. Sterling and her team moved with a calm, focused grace, explaining every procedure to Leo in simple, reassuring terms. The advanced nebulizer treatment began, delivering a fine, medicated mist deep into Mia's inflamed lungs. The biologics, administered through and for, were designed to target the specific source of the inflammation. There was nothing more to do but wait and let the medicine and Mia's own small, resilient body do their work. Julian stayed. He didn't retreat to his tower or manage his empire by phone. He canceled his meetings, postponed a trip to Asia, and simply sat with Leo in the small family lounge just outside the PICU. They drank bad coffee from a vending machine and ate stale crackers, two fathers united in a silent vigil. During those long hours, they talked more than they ever had before. Leo spoke of his dreams for Mia, of his hope that she would grow up to be strong and kind, that she would have opportunities he never did. Julian, in turn, shared more stories of Thomas and Amelia. He talked about teaching his son to ride a bike in a park just like the one they'd been in, about the silly bedtime rituals they had, about the weight of his wife's head on his shoulder as they watched a movie. It was a painful, cathartic exchange, a sharing of grief and hope that forged their bond into something akin to brotherhood. Julian saw in Leo's fierce, terrified love for Mia a mirror of his own past, and Leo saw in Julian's quiet, steadfast presence the friend he never knew he needed. On the second day, there was a change. A nurse came out, a small smile on her face. "Her oxygen saturation levels are improving," she said. "She's breathing more easily. The treatment is working." A wave of relief, so powerful it almost buckled Leo's knees, washed over him. He gripped Julian's arm, and Julian gripped back, a silent, shared acknowledgement of the turning tide. Later that afternoon, they were allowed to sit by Mia's bedside. She was still sleeping, but her color was better, the terrifying bluish tint gone. Her chest rose and fell in a slow, even rhythm. The strained, desperate fight for air had been replaced by peaceful rest. Leo sat holding her hand, tracing the lines on her small palm, tears of gratitude streaming silently down his face. Julian stood by the window, watching them, his expression unreadable but for the softness in his eyes. He felt a profound sense of rightness, a purpose that all his billions had never been able to buy. He wasn't just fixing a problem. He was helping to save a world, Leo's entire world. A few days later, Mia was moved out of the ICU and into a regular room. She was awake, and though she was weak, the spark was back in her eyes. The first thing she asked for was a strawberry popsicle and her drawing pad. Julian brought her both, along with a ridiculously large stuffed giraffe that barely fit through the door. "For being the bravest girl I know," he said, placing it on her bed. Mia giggled, a weak but happy sound that was the most beautiful music Leo had ever heard. She immediately started a drawing. It was, of course, of the three of them. This time, they were in a hospital room, but they were all smiling. She had drawn Julian holding the giant giraffe. She gave it to him, and he accepted it with the reverence of a king receiving a crown. The media, inevitably, got wind of the story. Tech billionaire Julian Croft funds miraculous recovery for employee's daughter. Reporters camped outside the hospital, hoping for a quote. Julian's PR team went into overdrive, trying to spin the narrative. But Julian refused to speak to them. He instructed his team to issue a single, simple statement. This is a private family matter. The word family was deliberate. It was a public declaration of the bond they had formed. When Mia was finally discharged a week later, healthy and chattering nonstop, it was Julian who drove them home. As they pulled up to their apartment building, Leo turned to him, his heart full. Julian, what you did, you didn't just save Mia's life. You saved mine. We saved each other, Leo, Julian replied, his voice quiet. The crisis had passed, but its impact lingered. It had burned away all pretense, all awkwardness, leaving behind the pure, unshakable core of their relationship. They were no longer a boss and an employee, a rich man and a poor man. They were Leo and Julian, and together with Mia, they were a family. The experience solidified Julian's transformation. The workaholic CEO who found solace only in profit margins began to delegate more, to trust his team. He started leaving the office at a reasonable hour. He realized that building an empire meant nothing if you had no one to share the kingdom with. He channeled his formidable resources and intellect into a new project, the Amelia and Thomas Croft Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to funding cutting-edge pediatric healthcare for underprivileged families. And he asked Leo to be on the board of directors. Me, Leo said, stunned, when Julian proposed it over dinner one night. What do I know about running a foundation? You know what it's like to be a terrified parent in a hospital waiting room, Julian said. You know what it's like to worry about the bills when you should only be worried about your child. Your voice, your perspective, is more valuable than any 10 experts I could hire. You will be the heart of this foundation, Leo. I will be the business. Together, we can make sure no parent has to go through what you did, what I did, alone. And so, Leo accepted. He found a new purpose, a new calling. He shared his story with donors, with doctors, with families, his simple, heartfelt honesty more persuasive than any polished marketing campaign. He was giving other families the same hope that Julian had given him. Their lives settled into a new, happy rhythm. Their Thursday night dinners became a sacred tradition. Weekends were for trips to the zoo, for building sandcastles at the beach, for simply being together. Julian's penthouse, once a monument to lonely grief, was now a home. It was filled with the clutter of a child's life, toys on the floor, fingerprints on the glass tables, and a growing gallery of crayon art on the refrigerator. One evening, about a year after Mia's illness, the three of them were sitting in Julian's living room. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow on their faces. Leo was reading a book, and Julian and Mia were on the floor, locked in a tense game of checkers. Mia, her face a mask of concentration, made a move and triumphantly jumped 3 of Julian's pieces. "King me," she shouted, giggling. Julian feigned a look of dramatic despair, making her laugh even harder. As he placed a second checker on top of her piece, Mia looked up at him, her expression suddenly serious. "Julian." "Yes, Mia. Can I call you Uncle Julian?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. The question hung in the quiet room. Leo looked up from his book, his heart catching in his throat. Julian froze, his hand hovering over the checkerboard. He looked at Mia's expectant face, her eyes shining with pure, unconditional affection. He then looked at Leo, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. The last vestiges of the old, broken Julian Croft seemed to melt away in the warmth of the firelight. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. "Yes, Mia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I would like that very much." He reached out and pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair. Leo watched them, a profound sense of peace settling over him. They had come so far from that rainy night in a worn-out sedan. A lost wallet had led to a found friendship. A shared grief had led to a shared hope. And a lonely billionaire and a struggling single dad had, against all odds, built a family. The city still glittered outside the vast windows, but it was no longer a cold, indifferent landscape. It was their city, and inside the tower, in the heart of the empire, three people sat by a fire, their lives interwoven into a story of redemption, a testament to the simple, extraordinary power of kindness. A heart that was once a locked room was now wide open, filled with the sound of a child's laughter, and it was the greatest treasure Julian Croft had ever possessed.